I'll give you 5 things to comment on, people can add on to this. But looking ahead, how should the Obama administration handle Iran? Okay, who should be appointed, what type of judge should be appointed to the Supreme Court? What should their position be on immigration? How important is the upcoming census? And how important is prison reform? Just a few things. It's buffet.
Prison reform is critical. I mean, prison, and by the way, I've worked with a group in New York for many years called the Correctional Association. It's interesting, they have seen more change in a good direction in these last 2 years than they've seen in decades, partly because of the deficit in the state and the repeal in New York, of course, of the Rockefeller drug law, which took organizing, which took a group, if you don't know it, the Working Families Party in New York and some of their organizing. But of course, the statistics are horrifying. And I think that if there's any common sense, ending the war on drugs and changing the treatment of decriminalizing and a whole series of things. On Iran, I think we have to continue to engage while we stand witness and with the democratic movement in Iran. I do think someone mentioned that we might be where McCain was. I think we might be at war with Iran if McCain was president. I worry that ongoing engagement becomes a cover for sanctions. I don't think, and there's a lot of talk, it's a different conversation, that Russia is going to come on board. I don't think they are. And the one small footnote in the IPS report, if I might, they haven't ended the missile defense stuff. They're going to mobile, which in Russia is very scary. And the biggest thing in Russia is NATO expansion. This sounds like Cold War time. It is Cold War time. NATO is Cold War. They're continuing to expand it to Georgia and Ukraine. On the Supreme Court, I think Sotomayor is another important step this year. It was, you know, there was criticism and this and that, but that was very important, and it could have been a far more brutal, ugly struggle. I think someone, as Obama put it quite well and got nailed for it, right? Empathy, sense of the people, not just
the wise Latino.
And finally, the census is, we are doing a lot of work at the nation in reporting on the census. There are a lot of right-wing attacks on it because they understand why they want to keep it under-reported and under. One thing, just to close, finishing with what you were saying about the reform of the prison system. Small reform, but this is how change is made. People who are in prisons in this country, first of all, examine that, but they should be counted where they live and not in the prison cities where they are incarcerated. That has shifted and skewed the census in very ugly ways.
I left one thing off because I wanted you to comment on it, and it will link us to our program this evening, and that's the environment.
This is really, I was reading the good IPS report, and this is a glass half full, half empty, I think, and I see this very closely at the magazine. I do think that the ability of this administration to use the EPA in more creative, important ways is something we could push for, because that is where a president can make a real difference. I mean, you know, just the small increase in regulations and the threat that we would begin to regulate corporations has led to a full employment program for lobbyists in this country. So I mean, that is but we need to push on that. But Copenhagen was very disappointing in many ways. There's some benchmarks, but part of it, again, to take it out of the Obama frame, if I could, Ethelbert, is the larger question of our political system and its incapacity to deal with a crisis like the climate crisis. Europe, slightly better, but no country, no system I know of is working, of the developing world system, is working on the pace, the grassroots, those global organizations, and this is more hopeful, like Bill McKibben's 350.org, what they are doing is consistent with what needs to be done, but our political system seems almost incapacitated and incapable of moving at a pace required to deal with this crisis.